Well, good day, folks. Monday, another week. Thank y'all for tuning in. So today's project will be thermostat housing on a 2002 Ford Ranger, and this thing has a 4-liter overhead cam V6. This is one of the earlier designs. The later model ones still use that same housing that we're going to be getting into. It's down here. I'll flip the camera around here just a second, but this is a first generation. You can tell by the design of the intake, the way they made it. It actually has dual runners in it as well, but they redesigned the intake later on with still dual runner length design, but it's got more tubes. You can actually see it. I think they changed that design in 04 or 05. So this motor didn't live too long like that. This is the housing I'm going to be changing. It's supposed to have the little hose. I'm going to get the little hose that goes there as well. It's a bypass hose that goes on. But flip the camera around here. There's the housing. These things here will leak water because they're made of plastic, and when it does, it has a tendency to run down the back of the motor. And when it does that, it runs over and between the motor and the transmission because of this valley they have right there and in the back. When I get some of this off, you'll see. And because the customer had called me and said that there was a possible freeze plug leaking on this because it looked like water was coming out between the engine and the transmission. And I said, okay. And I always try to check. I just, sometimes customers might not mean to tell you the wrong thing. So you always go, listen to what they say, but look at the problem first. And so when I pressure checked the system with my little handy dandy pressurizer, which this thing must have a slow short and he can cut it on anyhow. So I seen it squirting out of that housing. Well, so nothing left to do now but get to it. Let's see here. One other thing before we get this all tore into, I'll just give you a quick rundown of some of the tools that I'll be using. Hopefully I can get this housing off without pulling that plenum. It's pretty tight. I've done it, but there's a bolt that can get seized up and be hard to get out, and the top of it gets rusted. And if I can't get a socket on it, I will have to remove the intake. Otherwise, I can get something on there, and I'll show you. There's a bolt. It's hard to get to. But Fords, like General Motors and Fords and Chryslers, a lot of the times through most of the years up until here recently, I've seen some stuff differently. So I'll say within the past 2 years, disregard 20, everything changed in 2020. That's all I'm going to say. Even the sizes of bolts. I see Chryslers with 16 millimeter bolts, and I see Nissans with 15 millimeter and 6. That's weird. But let me get back here. So this is an older Ford, which I say older, it's an 02. And I'm using, most of my tools I'm going to be using are going to be between the 7 millimeter on some of these little bitty bolts like right here. So I won't need 7 much, but I got a 7 millimeter all the way up from an 8, a 10, every once in a while an 11, but not in this case. 13, 15, and 18, which I won't need 18, but that's Ford stuff. GM is the same way. They use 8, 10, 13, 15, 18. And so a lot of my wrenches are going to be around that. I love these little things here because I've got to release clips on things. This will be one of them. And instead of trying to push that down with pliers and breaking it, I can just get right underneath it a little bit, push down just a little bit because it's so brittle. We want to save that connector. That's 90% of what these jobs consist of is being real careful with these plastic parts. You just don't, you squeeze this with pliers, you stand a really good chance. So I can actually kind of just get right there, give it a little push down, slides right off. Same thing right here. I can get up underneath it. Instead of pushing that down, I can, I'm not even focusing. I get to talking. I can push that down right there and release that without breaking the clip. Because a lot of times, if you try to do certain things with pliers and all, you'll end up breaking the clip. I even get these little small ones, a little angled right here. Right here, and I can get underneath little things like that right there. I can get up underneath that. That actually is really hard to press down when you do it. It always breaks off. And when I get up underneath it, I can just push it right off of there. Well, like I said, push it right off of there, but yep, there it goes. Instead of pushing that and breaking that piece off. So it's kind of handy to have this little thing to, like I say, get up underneath this stuff here. And this is missing some bolts. I didn't take this off yet, but we'll find some stuff to go in there. I can see where somebody's been in here working at some point, but we're not going to go that far. We're just going to get as much off the front here as we need to. So let's get to it. All right, ladies and germs. All right, here we go. All right, so this is the bolt I'm talking about that's going to be the one that's the kicker. It's the one way back. Let me drop my extension down in this hole.
So that in the back.
This one right back here. I've had luck.
Good right here.
Yep, I got. So what we got right here, we're gonna try to get that.
Back.
Yep, but the thing is that this would be sure nice if this was a 6-point socket. Oh, that's a 12-point, so we're gonna see what happens. And it's a 9, so I gotta get my 8 on there. But anyways, all right, so we'll see what happens. All right, here we go. We got the piece off. I took the top part of this off first while it was still in the vehicle. That made I could get to these bolts back here. And then you've got this guy right here. Hey, super cool dude. I'll tell you about him in future videos. Matter of fact, he's the guy that I learned how to do the gasket tapping trick from for breaking gaskets loose. I did that video on if anybody was watching that. But here it is, right there. That's what it looks like with the housing off. I've got to go in there and clean it up. I'm going to use my whizzer wheel the best I can and my little wire wheel. And we're going to make it look like brand new. Well, okay, so now we're reinstalling this thermostat housing. As everything has went very, very well. We haven't had too bad of mishaps yet. So let's flip around the camera right quick. All righty, here we are. I took the screws out of this. There's one at the top and one at the bottom, and pulled this little housing out. And what this housing is for the PCV, positive crankcase ventilation. And what that allows to happen is it allows the engine to cycle the crankcase ventilation gases by the PCV valve pulling in this direction going to the intake. There's another hose right here at this valve cover, and what its job is, it's plumbed into the air box or the air filter, the air intake tube, and it's plumbed in after the air filter, meaning that the air that it's drawing in is clean air. And it draws air in this way, and it allows you to kind of vent the crankcase to relieve any pressures that are left over from the little bit of gap on your rings, the pulsing that happens when the pistons are going up and down, because you are displacing a certain amount of air when the pistons are going from top dead center to bottom dead center. And now another thing that's also really notable about this whole setup is that there is a PCV valve. That line actually pulls air. Just to give you a quick rundown, you'll notice this is the mass airflow sensor. So the engine is able to calculate the airflow, because if you were to have this pulling air before the mass airflow sensor, being the fact it's a strategic vacuum leak that's regulated by the PCV valve that's at the back of the motor that you cannot see right now, then you would have a problem with air-fuel ratio, because there'd be an unknown source of air, and the computer would have to see that and then would have to compensate for that, and then you wouldn't be able to run in closed loop or 14.7 to 1, which is stoichiometric. That's our big word for the day, meaning that you're at balance of 14.7 to 1 parts air to 1 part fuel. And by the way, just so happens that sea level atmospheric pressure is 14.7 psi at sea level. So think about that for a minute. Kind of weird how those numbers associate. So of course, like I say, they'll pull air after the mass airflow sensor. I mean, any air drawn in is being monitored by this sensor, so it can calculate and know what to do with it. The idle control valve is not a stepper motor, but it's able to actuate off of a certain amount of voltage applied to it to open up the panel to a certain place. And it doesn't have any sensors because it's just a 2-wire plug-in. How it knows where to put it at is by watching engine RPMs by the crankshaft sensor. And you are just apply a certain amount of voltage to this, and the more voltage, the more it opens up, the faster it idles, and all you're doing is a calculated vacuum leak, which is, like I say, being applied to before the mass airflow sensor to compensate, because you're not adjusting the throttle plate. You don't do any of that to just idle. This right here. Now you do have a base idle screw, and that's all that's there for is just to kind of just give the throttle position a somewhere consistent place to be. There's very little, if any, airflow that goes through this right here whenever you're at idle. It's all traveling through this hole right here, which as you can see would normally made up to that right there, which there, if I take this off, there's 2 holes. Air goes in, air goes back down into the intake, and just a change in voltage can change RPMs, and that's all calculated by this mass airflow sensor in correlation with some other sensors as well. We won't get too off a far subject about that, but that's a basic on how that works. Now, like I said, we're going back with it. Gotta hook the hose up, and a couple other things. Put some screws. There's go back to this again. There's one here. There's also one at the very bottom. So if you're doing that, you need to remember that the one at the bottom. And if you're, yes, we're gonna put both of them back. People out there watching, we won't skimp on it. So okay, well, let's finish her up. Well, we've got it running. Let's take a look. Sounds okay. Yeah, I gotta put that little cover back on this. It's right here. Cover, but that wasn't the. It's tight. To do that job, it's pretty tight. It takes I'll move it here so it's not so loud so you can hear me. If you're gonna take on that job, just be patient. Take your time with a lot of that stuff. Don't get in a rush, you know, because it is kind of tight in there. And by removing some stuff instead of fighting it out of there, you actually cause less damage and not break anything. So that's why I went an extra step on a couple of items I actually wanted to get out of the way. Total time on this job took me, I don't know, about 3 hours. It really did. I had working in a couple of tight places. There was a section of hoses that I had to remove. Matter of fact, let me flip the camera around and I'll show you. Down over here, my light. It was this just hose assembly right here. This bracket. There's some pretty hard to get to bolts down there at the bottom. That's why I say just be patient. That way I can lift that up because there's a little bitty elbow that's actually really hard to get off, and those are hard to get. You cannot find. Let me flip back around. The elbow that I'm talking about is non-existent at the dealership and or at aftermarket. You have to match some kind of elbow hose up, and it's two sizes to it. Makes it really hard. So if I can salvage that hose, it can be changed from the top without too much trouble, but I'll be careful about bending it too much. So that was about the 90% of that job, was just getting stuff out of the way. So thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you guys being involved and taking part and subscribing to this channel and watching these videos, because we're a team, guys. We're a team in many, many ways. We are linked. Like that song says, radar love. We got that. Trust me, all of us do. So really appreciate you guys. And you have a good rest of the day, and we'll catch you tomorrow. We'll get some more videos out. Thank you very much. Lots of love, man. I'm out.